Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. If you're new to The Authority File, you can listen to and find previous episodes on all of the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and on our website, choice360.org. Academic libraries are changing. There's no doubt about that. Space, access, and formats are being redefined. In some operational areas, COVID has quickened the pace of change, while in others, libraries are adapting in the face of shrinking budgets, shifting institutional priorities, and new opportunities with digital resource acquisition and management. In this four-part series, which is provided with support from OverDrive, my guests and I discuss these changes as they impact the academic library community, including the publishers and vendors who serve it. Joining me are Tracy Holtman, Associate Director of Access and Collection Services at Tarleton State University, Susanna Smith, Acquisitions Librarian at Georgia Highlands College, Paige Clunie, Digital Partnerships Manager at Princeton University Press, and Stephen Rosato, General Manager at OverDrive Academic. In this third episode, we discuss how acquisition practices are changing, whether due to COVID, shifting budgets, or new access models. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about acquisition strategies. Sticking with you, Tracy and Susanna, how has COVID impacted your acquisition policies and workflows? Were changes already happening and did the pandemic just accelerate those, or have you taken more of a reactionary path as a result of the pandemic? And Tracy, we'll start with you.
We had already been purchasing electronic resources, we call them. In fact, about 68% of our collection is already electronic. Mm-hmm. But we certainly shifted a policy to that was basically all we were buying. And previously, if we had a title in print, then we didn't rebuy it electronically. But when COVID happened, we had to re-examine some of those policies. You know, just because it was here in the building but they needed it elsewhere, then we needed to provide that. Additionally, textbooks. We've never before bought textbooks, but with the university moving toward OER textbooks and us trying to provide them if they weren't here, then we kind of shifted to buying electronic textbooks if we could. Mm-hmm. So, and then multi-access titles. Before, as mentioned, it was one copy, one user, but now we try to get those that have multi-users or unlimited users, so the whole entire class can use it, or it can be used for the whole entire semester if needed as a source material.
Okay. And Susanna, how about you?
Yeah, it's the same. You know, certainly the pandemic accelerated the trend that was already happening, switching from print to digital. And we had exactly some of the same things. You know, we never purchased textbooks. We had them on reserve if the department sent them to us, but we didn't go out and actively purchase them. Over the last few years, Georgia Highlands has been really, really strong in the open education world, and so we've got a lot of now open content that we use, but a lot of our faculty like to have kind of more trade type books as supplemental books. You know, like one of our philosophy professors uses the Jordan Peterson book and has them read an essay out of that. And mm-hmm. we had that was circulating. And so we look to see, well, where can we buy these online one-offs? Because we don't, as an individual institution, we don't buy ebook packages. We're part of the University System of Georgia, and that broad consortia purchases these enormous ebook packages through EBSCO and ProQuest. And so that's our main pool of ebooks, which mm-hmm. is a huge, huge, huge collection. So I'm filling in the gaps where it's not already available. Okay, you need this book. Let me go see where I can get it. And, you know, we've used OverDrive for some of those because especially if they're those trade publications, we can get them in OverDrive faster and easier than we can set up, you know, a new license agreement with a new publisher. So let's just get it through OverDrive and get a couple of copies so that it's available.
Mm-hmm. Stephen and Paige, I'm wondering if you're seeing similar patterns.
Yeah, I mean, as recently as 2018, the ebook print split for Princeton was 30/70, and now just, a few years later, those numbers are nearly inverse at 65% ebook, 35% print. I have to imagine for schools like Susanna's, they're relieved that, folks are now catching up to the hybrid reality that they already had. This prompted also an expediting of a backlist digitization project that was already underway called Princeton Global Discovery. So, making sure all of these older titles that we previously didn't have ebooks will now have them and will now be made available to libraries. So since 2020, we've digitized 1,200 titles and made them available. So, it just continually going back to that conversation about access, just making content available to libraries.
Mm-hmm.
For OverDrive, we're all digital anyway, so we just see, anything I've noticed is schools are definitely moving faster than they had historically in making decisions, both in the evaluation of OverDrive and, what is possible. It would usually take, a year is not unusual for someone who actually really wanted it to make a decision. And now when we come across those people who know that they need digital, it could be as fast as a few weeks. And I actually had one school up in Canada who signed, from the first conversation. I think they were familiar with OverDrive anyway, but they did a quick title analysis, and actually it was replacing a bunch of physical titles they had. And they were pleasantly surprised that we had probably about 80-90% of the books that they were looking for. And these were some that were going back, quite a bit. They were just not available in digital format anywhere.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about budgets, Tracy and Susanna, and ask you how your budgets are shifting, to accommodate these acquisition efforts that you've been describing. What are you spending on? What are you cutting back on? And why, basically? And Susanna, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so the first thing we did when our budget got slashed in summer of 2020 is we eliminated our entire print journal collection.
Mm-hmm.
We said, we're not spending these tens of thousands of dollars on print journals anymore. People can't get in to use them. They're only housed at one library anyway.
Mm.
So that was an easy chop off the top. And then we had to look, okay, so what of these are accreditation issues that we've got to have access to these particular journals because of nursing accreditation or dental hygiene accreditation or whatever, to make sure that we had those or something that would work already in the digital collections that we owned through the USG. So that was a big one. It also forced us to take a really hard look at kind of what I call the legacy databases that we've had a really long time that used to be used a lot. And because usage is changing, those particular resources aren't being used and others are being used. So we spent a lot of time looking at that and saying, okay, well, if we eliminated this, we can make sure the faculty know that this would work in its place and starting to save money that way. It's just really just about shifting, almost all our funds. I was about 80% of my budget is digital this year.
Mm.
Whereas it was closer to 60-40 in the past, print and all kinds of forms of print. So I think that's going to be the new normal.
Yeah. So with those legacy databases, Susanna, I'm wondering, what are they? What were they?
Do you want me to name? I didn't want to call out vendors whose databases that I've dropped.
I don't think you need to do that. I'm just curious, what were their characteristics that made them quote unquote legacy?
There was a collection of databases that we'd had forever from this one particular vendor, and they had not done a lot of updating.
Okay.
They had not done a lot of bringing it out of the 90s into the 2000s.
Yeah.
It had great content, but it was clunky and hard to use.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, we can find this same information Over here,
Mm-hmm.
it looks a little better. It might be not as easy to find or not as, not the same that the instructors are used to,
Yeah.
but it's the same content and we can save this money.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that, just like, or we had two different databases that focused on kind of the same thing. And so let's pick the one that is the best and let's drop one and keep the other. And just, it's a faculty training thing. Like, look, here's a new database. You've been using the other one. This one's just as good. Here's how to find what you need.
Yep. Excellent. And Tracy, how about you? Same set of questions.
We followed almost all of her strategies as well, but a couple more I'll mention. Along with the deduping, if we get a request from a faculty member, we'll be great. Now, what do you want us to drop to buy that? That's kind of my number one question anymore for them. And then we also we already had a demand-driven acquisition program, but we really stepped that up in that we preload titles that are available, and we're not charged for them, don't actually buy them until a student uses them or touches them. So any title that I get a request for, if it's available to make demand-driven, then I will do that to try to, okay, yeah, we'll buy it, but only if they're really going to use it. And that was a really good strategy for us. That really helped save our budget about $11,000 last year.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was going to ask you both in terms of access models, how you're planning for those, what your preferences are, and
I adore the DDA PDA model where we can open up a catalog to our students, and if books are touched, unused, then we get the choice to buy them or to no longer make it available. So like a student could look at it and we realize that, they only looked at it for 30 seconds. So that's probably not the book that they would. So we're not going to buy that one. Or, okay, a student bought this one and used it for 4 hours. And it's in a subject that we teach, and my bet is that they're going to use it again. And so we would purchase it, and then that would become a perpetual access title. We've got one vendor who does that with a big collection of expensive books that has just really saved us. We used to spend $25,000 on these books, both print and e, and now we can open up just the ebook catalog and purchase those books that are getting used. And the same is true with, there's several video vendors who do the same thing. And for a small school who doesn't have a really big budget, that means that I'm getting exactly what my students and faculty need at the moment of need. And that's amazing.
Yeah. Stephen and Paige, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on those.
I was going to jump in anyway, because we do find providing books in a variety of lending models just helps the academic libraries use their budgets way more efficiently. I always use this very specific example. So if you've talked to me, you've probably heard it. But I had a school who wanted to, their incoming freshman class, read the Ta-Nehisi Coates book, Between the World and Me. It was $85 a copy. They were going to buy 85 copies. It was like well over $7,000 for them to do that. And I would discourage almost anyone from doing that, because probably, come spring semester, you're going to probably have 80 copies sitting on a shelf, which isn't, a really poor way of using budget. Penguin Random House, it was their book. They made it available under what we call max access, where you could buy 100 simultaneous circs for, about 1.5 times the price of the perpetual access. So they bought 2 copies in perpetual access, and they ended up spending somewhere around $1,800 for something that would have cost them, over $7,000 to do. So they had still the perpetual access, yet they're able to meet that student demand very quickly. And it was a much better user experience for everyone, but saving the library money. We have another lending model that was slow to take off in libraries, but they're increasingly using it. We call it cost per circ, where you can add titles, and they're typically, the vast majority are between $2 and $4 per circ. So you could add, like normally when I talk to library, if they want to add, 100 titles and they're an average price of $50 per title, that's $5,000. Those books might only circ, 40 or 50 times in a semester, and you're doing 4 times 40, it's $160 versus $5,000. So it's just a much more efficient way of using it. You could still buy it in perpetual access, but you're making it available to more students for just a lot less money. So however we could, bridge the gap to access and save money, that's, it's just far more sustainable And that's what we're in. So I'll leave it over to Paige because she deals with this probably just as much.
Yeah, I mean, we realize it's so important to participate in a variety of sales models since there's no one size fits all acquisition strategy for academic libraries. So it's also balancing for our list, the importance of a perpetual purchase, but for our backlist, we participate in all the patron-driven acquisition models because we know that libraries are now relying heavily on that data. So again, it's always balancing what is going to sustain our publishing program going forward, especially for some of the lower use monographs that are critical for scholarship, but do see a lower use. So again, the range of diverse models has been really important for us in providing access to libraries.
You just heard from Tracy Holtman, Associate Director of Access and Collection Services at Tarleton State University, Susanna Smith, Acquisitions Librarian at Georgia Highlands College, Paige Clunie, Digital Partnerships Manager at Princeton University Press, and Stephen Rosato, General Manager at OverDrive Academic. This 4-part series is brought to you with support from OverDrive. Join us next week when my guests look ahead at potential workflow changes, budget considerations, where innovation is likely to happen, and upcoming digital content trends.
There's always been such an important relationship between university presses and libraries, existing in the same ecosystem, along with our scholars and readers. So it's just making sure that this is a healthy ecosystem for all of us. And I think it's so important to always be agile and asking questions. Conversations like this that involve libraries and vendors and publishers is excellent. I mean, everything we do is an opportunity to learn, and I just am always reminding myself of that.
As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.